Anita wasn't born into wealth, but she had the kind of beauty that silenced rooms, with a heart even larger than her smile. Their wedding had been a spectacle of luxury and love. But people never see the cracks beneath the golden walls. Charles promised Anita the world, but behind closed doors, his love was conditional, built on her appearance, her shape, her looks. What Anita didn't know was that the man she gave her heart to had a cruel side that would one day break her spirit. The first year of Anita and Charles's marriage had been a fairy tale. They traveled the world, appeared on magazine covers, and dined in the most expensive restaurants across Europe and Dubai. Everywhere they went, Anita was praised as the billionaire's jewel, slim, elegant, and radiant. But life has a way of testing love. When Anita became pregnant, the doctors warned her it would be a difficult journey. Carrying twins was never easy, and her body endured more than it could bear. She vomited endlessly, battled dizziness, and at one point, nearly lost her life in the delivery room. But when the twins, two healthy boys, were placed in her arms, Anita thought it was worth every scar, every stretch mark, every sleepless night. She smiled through the pain, believing Charles would see her as a hero. She was wrong. At first, he pretended to care, bringing flowers and expensive jewelry. But as Anita's body began to change, her figure fuller, her once flat stomach soft, her once slim arms rounder, his love grew colder. He would return home late at night, his eyes barely meeting hers, his words sharp and cutting. "Anita," he once said, watching her struggle to zip her dress, "you used to look like a model. Now you look ordinary." The words stung like acid. When they attended dinners, Charles would make excuses for her absence, claiming she was too tired with the kids. In truth, he no longer wanted to show her off. The woman who risked her life to bring his children into the world had suddenly become an embarrassment in his eyes. But the cruelest part was not what he said, it was how he looked at her. His gaze, once filled with pride and love, now carried disappointment, disgust, and pity. Anita tried to hide her pain. She wore loose gowns around the house, starved herself on diets, and forced smiles whenever guests were around. But deep inside, she wondered, did my beauty mean more to him than my sacrifice? And slowly, silently, Anita's heart began to break. For Anita, the gala had once been her favorite night. She remembered how, in their first year of marriage, Charles had proudly held her hand as photographers swarmed them. "My queen," he had whispered, "you shine brighter than all the diamonds in this room." But this year was different. As she slipped into her emerald green gown, Anita caught her reflection in the mirror. Her figure had changed. The gown hugged her curves in ways it never did before. She placed her hands on her stomach, remembering the twins she had brought into the world. This body carried life, she told herself. I should be proud. Still, a knot of fear sat heavy in her chest. When they entered the ballroom, whispers immediately filled the air. Some women smiled politely, others exchanged glances, and a few even smirked. Anita lifted her chin, refusing to let them see her crumble. She clung to Charles's arm, hoping for reassurance, but his face remained stiff, his eyes darting around the room as though searching for an escape. Dinner was served, glasses of champagne clinked, and the atmosphere buzzed with music and laughter. Then came the moment Anita would never forget. Charles stood to give his toast. Cameras flashed. All eyes turned to the billionaire. He spoke with his usual charm about business growth, future investments, and his empire's success. Then, with a sly smile, he turned toward Anita. "My friends," he said, raising his glass, "you remember how I used to bring my slim, beautiful wife to these events? Well, let's just say marriage has expanded her horizons." Laughter erupted across the room. Some guests tried to hide their chuckles behind napkins. Others looked directly at Anita, their eyes glimmering with amusement. Anita's cheeks burned. She felt the room spinning. The champagne in her hand trembled, spilling slightly onto her gown. Her heart thudded painfully against her chest, and her eyes blurred with tears she refused to shed in public. In that moment, the love of her life had reduced her to a punchline. The same man she nearly died for in the delivery room. The same man she defended when the world called him ruthless. The same man who once called her his queen. Now, she was his joke. Anita forced a smile, though inside she was shattering. She whispered silently to herself, "Don't cry here. Not in front of them. Not in front of him." But as the guests clapped and the music resumed, Anita knew something had died inside her that night. A part of her that once believed love was stronger than pride. The gala ended in a blur. Laughter and music still echoed in Anita's ears as the driver opened the car door for them. Charles, drunk on champagne and pride, leaned back in his seat, scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the storm inside his wife. Anita stared out the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and red. The memory of the crowd's laughter replayed over and over in her mind. Each chuckle was a dagger, each smirk a wound. She bit her lip so hard it bled, determined not to break in front of Charles. When they arrived at the mansion, Anita excused herself quietly and went straight to their bedroom. Charles barely looked up. "Don't stay up too late," he muttered, pouring himself another glass of whiskey. She entered the bathroom and locked the door. For a long moment, she stood frozen in front of the mirror. The woman staring back at her was unrecognizable, her eyes swollen with unshed tears, her makeup smeared from the night's torment, her emerald gown now dull against her weary frame. Slowly, she slid down to the cold marble floor, hugging her knees to her chest. That was when the dam broke. Hot tears streamed down her face, her body shaking with the sobs she had buried all evening. "Why, Charles?" she whispered through her tears. "Why am I no longer enough for you?" She thought about the nights she stayed awake nursing the twins while he slept soundly. The mornings she pushed herself to cook his favorite meals despite her exhaustion. The sacrifices she made, the life she risked in the delivery room, all of it seemed invisible to him. The man who once called her his queen now saw her as a burden, a joke. She picked up the gown's fabric and clutched it tightly, as though holding herself together. For the first time, Anita wondered if love could truly survive humiliation. Hours passed. Charles eventually stumbled into the bedroom, falling onto the bed without a glance at the closed bathroom door. Anita remained inside, her tears staining the hem of her dress, her spirit sinking deeper into silence. That night, in the cold glow of the bathroom mirror, Anita realized something had changed forever. She was still alive, but the laughter that had once filled her heart was gone. And though she didn't know it yet, this night would mark the beginning of her awakening. Weeks passed after the gala humiliation, yet Anita still carried the sting in her chest like a wound that refused to heal. She stopped attending social gatherings, stopped taking pictures, and even avoided mirrors. To the world, she was the billionaire's wife living in luxury, but inside, she felt like a prisoner in her own skin. One Saturday afternoon, against her will, Anita attended a charity event organized for orphans in the city. Charles had traveled abroad for a business deal, leaving her to represent the family. She almost declined, but something deep inside whispered that she needed to go. The event was held in a modest community hall, nothing compared to the glittering ballrooms she was used to. Children laughed as they received school supplies and food. For the first time in a long while, Anita smiled, not because of appearances, but because she felt genuine joy watching innocent faces light up. As she was handing out gift bags, a warm, calm voice spoke behind her. "You give so much, but why do your eyes look so empty?" Anita turned. Standing before her was Dr. Daniel Okeke, a renowned nutritionist and life coach invited to speak to the children about health. He wasn't dressed in designer suits like the men at Charles' galas, just a simple white shirt and dark trousers, but his presence was commanding. His eyes weren't fixed on her body or her gown. They were searching her soul. Caught off guard, Anita forced a smile. "I don't know what you mean, doctor. I'm perfectly fine." But Daniel shook his head gently. "No. Your lips are smiling, but your eyes, they're crying." Those words pierced her deeper than any insult Charles had ever thrown. Because for the first time, someone saw her pain without her saying a word. They ended up talking at length, away from the crowd. Anita, against her own caution, opened up about her struggles. Not every detail, but enough for him to understand. She spoke of exhaustion, of losing herself after childbirth, of feeling invisible in her own home. Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked at her with kindness, not pity. "Mrs. Nwako," he said softly, "your body tells the story of a woman who gave life. That is not weakness, it is power. But the greatest tragedy is not the weight you carry outside, it's the weight you carry inside. And that is what I want to help you put down." Anita's breath caught. No one, not even Charles, had ever spoken to her that way. In that moment, something flickered inside her. A spark, a whisper of hope, a reminder that she was more than her size, more than her husband's mockery, more than the cruel laughter at the gala. For the first time in years, Anita felt seen, not as a decoration, not as a wife, not as a joke, but as a woman. And though she didn't yet realize it, this chance encounter with Dr. Daniel was the beginning of a journey that would transform not just her body, but her soul. Anita's meeting with Dr. Daniel lingered in her heart like a gentle echo she couldn't ignore. His words followed her home, replaying in her mind each time she looked in the mirror. The greatest tragedy is not the weight you carry outside, it's the weight you carry inside. That night, while Charles slept soundly beside her, Anita sat awake, staring at the ceiling. She realized she had been living not for herself, but for a man who saw her worth only in her body. She whispered to herself, "If I don't save me, no one will." The next morning, she called Daniel. That single call marked the first step of her transformation. Daniel didn't force her into grueling exercises or impossible diets. Instead, he introduced her to balance. Simple walks in the morning, light stretches, nutritious meals that nourished rather than starved her. At first, Anita struggled. She sweated, she panted, she complained. But Daniel's voice always echoed, "Don't punish your body, honor it. It gave you children. It deserves love, not hatred." Each drop of sweat became a prayer, each step a rebellion against the humiliation she had endured. Slowly, her strength began to return. Her breathing steadied. Her energy rose. She began to move with grace again. But it wasn't just her body that changed, it was her spirit. Daniel encouraged her to journal every night, writing not what she hated about herself, but what she was grateful for. At first, her pages were blank. But slowly, they filled with words. "I am alive. I am a mother. I am strong. I am more than my reflection." She also began reading books about self-worth, about women who had conquered shame and risen above pain. Every word poured strength into her soul. As her confidence grew, so did her courage. Anita started speaking at small women's gatherings in her community, telling her story, sharing her struggles with weight, childbirth, and shame. The women listened, tears streaming down their faces, because they saw themselves in her. She wasn't the billionaire's wife on a pedestal anymore. She was a woman who had suffered, who understood, who cared. "Don't let anyone silence you because of your body," Anita told them. "You are more than curves, more than scars, more than numbers on a scale. You are enough." The applause that followed filled her with something Charles S. Praise had never given her, authentic validation. Charles noticed the changes, but not with admiration. Instead, he grew irritated. He would return home to find Anita glowing after her morning walks, smiling as she played with the twins, or jotting notes in her journal. "What's all this new routine about?" he sneered one evening. "You think walking around the compound will make you a model again?" But Anita no longer flinched. She simply smiled, her eyes steady. "I don't need to be a model, Charles. I just need to be myself." For the first time, the power shifted. It started small. One evening, while Charles lounged in his leather chair sipping whiskey, he flipped through the TV channels absent-mindedly. He wasn't expecting anything unusual, just the usual business reports and political debates. But then he froze. On the screen, beneath the glow of stage lights, was Anita. His Anita. She wasn't in an expensive designer gown or draped in diamonds. She wore a simple but elegant dress, her natural beauty radiating more than any jewelry ever could. She stood before an audience of women, her voice calm but powerful, her presence commanding. And for years, she said, her tone steady, I believed my worth was tied to how I looked. I let people's words break me. I allowed shame to silence me. But today, I stand here as proof that women are not defined by their bodies, but by their strength, their sacrifices, and their dreams. The hall erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Charles' jaw tightened, his grip on the glass trembling. He turned up the volume, staring at the woman on the screen as though she were a stranger. This was not the broken, timid wife who once cried in their bathroom. This was a woman reborn. She can't be serious, he muttered under his breath. All this, without me. But Anita was serious. And she was unstoppable. Clips of her speech spread like wildfire on social media. Women everywhere reposted her words, calling her a voice for the voiceless. Newspapers ran headlines. Billionaire's wife turns advocate for women's strength. Anita Nwako inspires thousands with message of self-worth. Suddenly, it was no longer Charles' empire people were talking about. It was Anita's courage. Charles couldn't escape it. At business meetings, partners congratulated him. You're lucky, Charles, one CEO chuckled. Your wife is a global sensation now. She's even more popular than you. Each comment was salt in his wound. For years, he had paraded Anita as his trophy, only to discard her when her beauty no longer fit his standards. And now, the same woman he mocked had become the center of admiration, while he sat in the shadows. At home, he tried to assert control. You're letting this attention get to your head, Anita. Don't forget you're my wife. This fame of yours is temporary. But Anita looked at him with calm eyes that unnerved him. No, Charles. What's temporary is the shame you buried me in. I've dug myself out, and I'm not going back. For the first time in his life, Charles felt powerless in his own home. As Anita's star rose higher, Charles' bitterness grew. He found himself pacing at night, replaying her speeches, scrolling through endless online praises for her. How had he lost control? How had the woman he belittled turned into a force greater than him? The realization hit him like a slap. He had underestimated her. He had mocked her into becoming unbreakable. And nothing terrified Charles more than the thought that one day, Anita might rise so high, she would no longer need him at all. Anita's life transformed almost overnight. The woman who once hid in the shadows of her husband's wealth was now standing under spotlights across the world. Invitations poured in from organizations in New York, London, Johannesburg, and Dubai. International brands reached out, begging her to be the face of their empowerment campaigns. Everywhere she went, women flocked to her, not to admire her looks, but to draw strength from her story. They whispered to her after conferences, tears in their eyes. You saved me. I thought I was alone. Because of you, I want to live again. For the first time in her life, Anita realized that her pain had not been in vain. Her humiliation, her tears, her struggles, everything had become the foundation of a movement far greater than herself. At a United Nations Women's Summit, Anita delivered a speech so moving that diplomats wiped tears from their eyes. She didn't speak like a billionaire's wife. She spoke like a warrior who had been through the fire and emerged stronger. Strength, she declared, her voice echoing in the grand hall, is not measured by perfection, but by survival. Every scar tells a story, every curve carries a sacrifice, and every woman has the right to be respected, not mocked, not shamed, not silenced. The hall erupted in thunderous applause. Global media outlets carried her words across continents. Overnight, Anita became a symbol of hope. Back in Nigeria, Charles began to feel the walls closing in. At business meetings, partners who once praised him now praised Anita instead. Your wife is remarkable, one investor said. Her influence has opened doors even your billions couldn't. Those words cut deeper than any knife. For years, Charles had built his empire with money and power, yet now, the world bowed to Anita, not for her wealth, but for her courage. At home, the atmosphere shifted. The staff, who once trembled at Charles's presence, now looked to Anita with respect and admiration. Even the twins, growing more aware, clung more to their mother than their father. Charles felt it. His kingdom was no longer his alone. The final blow came when Anita was invited to a gala, ironically, in the same ballroom where Charles once humiliated her. But this time, she wasn't a shadow hiding behind her husband. She was the guest of honor. As she stepped onto the stage in a flowing gown that embraced her curves with pride, cameras flashed, and the audience rose in respect. She was no longer the joke, she was the story. And as Charles sat in the audience, forced to clap along with everyone else, he tasted a bitter truth. The tables had turned. The woman he mocked for being fat was now the woman the world celebrated. The wife he humiliated was now the queen he could never overshadow. And for the first time, Charles realized he hadn't just underestimated Anita, he had lost her. The night of the gala shimmered with grandeur. Crystal chandeliers bathed the ballroom in golden light, violins played softly in the background, and the air was thick with perfume, power, and prestige. It was the very same stage where Charles had once humiliated Anita, reducing her to laughter and whispers. But tonight, the story was different. Anita arrived not as someone's wife, not as a billionaire's accessory, but as the guest of honor. Her gown flowed like liquid silver, hugging her curves with pride instead of shame. She walked gracefully, each step a declaration. I am no longer the woman you mocked. When her name was announced for the Woman of Strength Award, the hall erupted with applause. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even chanting her name. Cameras flashed furiously, capturing her radiant smile. Anita walked to the podium, her heart steady, her voice calm. She looked over the sea of faces, and then her eyes landed on Charles. He was seated near the front, his jaw tight, his hands clapping reluctantly, his eyes betraying shame. For a moment, their past flashed before her. The insults, the humiliation, the tears shed alone on a cold bathroom floor. And then, she spoke. Years ago, she began, her voice clear and unwavering. I stood in this same ballroom as the butt of a cruel joke. I was mocked for my body, laughed at for my weight, humiliated for the sacrifices I made as a mother. That night, I went home broken, questioning my worth. The audience fell silent, hanging on her every word. But today, I stand here no longer broken. I stand here as a woman who has learned that true strength does not come from a perfect body, but from an unbreakable spirit. True beauty is not in the eyes that mock you, but in the courage to rise above mockery. And true power is in refusing to let anyone define who you are. Tears glistened in the eyes of many women in the audience. Even men nodded in admiration. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room before resting briefly on Charles. So, to every woman listening tonight, you are not less because you don't fit someone's standard. You are not less because of scars, or curves, or stretch marks. You are enough. And never again should you let anyone make you feel otherwise. The hall exploded in thunderous applause. Guests stood, clapping, whistling, shouting her name. Some wiped tears, others held their hands to their chests in awe. As the ovation shook the room, Charles sat frozen. He could not hide from the truth. The woman he once mocked was now celebrated by the world. He had tried to break her spirit, but instead, he had forged her into steel. The cameras captured everything, the proud glow on Anita's face, the admiration of the crowd, and the bitterness etched on Charles'. And by the end of the night, everyone knew the truth. Anita was no longer the billionaire's wife. She was Anita, the queen who had turned humiliation into triumph. And Charles? He was the forgotten man in her shadow. The weeks after the gala were like living inside a whirlwind. Anita's face graced the covers of major magazines, her speech went viral across social media, and invitations flooded her office from women's organizations around the world. She had become more than a survivor, she was a voice, a symbol, a movement. Meanwhile, Charles' empire began to tremble. His once glittering reputation was now tainted. The same business partners who used to laugh at Anita behind her back now avoided Charles. Investors pulled out of deals, whispering that the billionaire who mocked his wife was a liability. The man who once walked with arrogance now found himself isolated. One evening, as Anita was preparing for another international conference, her doorbell rang. When she opened the door, she froze. It was Charles. He looked nothing like the powerful billionaire she once knew. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his face pale with regret. He held a bouquet of white roses, his hands trembling. "Anita, please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I know I don't deserve to stand here, but I need you to listen. I was a fool. I let pride and ego destroy the only good thing in my life. I mocked you when I should have cherished you. I humiliated you when I should have protected you. Please, forgive me. Give me one more chance." Anita stood silently, her heart heavy but resolute. She had dreamed of this moment once, the day Charles would realize her worth. But now, standing before him, she felt no longing, only clarity. She took a deep breath, her voice calm but firm. "Charles, the man I once loved died the night you mocked me in front of the world. You didn't just laugh at my body, you laughed at my soul. And while you were tearing me down, I was building myself up. Now, I don't need your approval, your wealth, or your name. I found myself when you lost me." Charles's eyes welled with tears. He dropped to his knees, clutching her hand. "Please, Anita, don't leave me in this emptiness. You're all I have left." But Anita gently pulled her hand away. "No, Charles. I am not all you have left. You still have your money, your pride, your power. But me? You lost me forever." With that, she stepped back, closing the door softly but firmly. Charles remained on his knees, staring at the wooden door that now separated him from the woman he had once taken for granted. Inside, Anita leaned against the door, a single tear escaping her eye. But it wasn't a tear of sorrow, it was release. She had finally broken free from the shackles of his mockery and pain. Months later, Anita's organization expanded globally, offering support for women who had endured humiliation, abuse, and emotional trauma. She became a household name, not because of her husband's billions, but because of her courage. And Charles? His empire crumbled slowly. He became a cautionary tale whispered in business circles. The man who mocked his queen and lost his crown. In the end, Anita stood taller than she ever had, not because she was flawless, but because she refused to let anyone else define her worth. And Charles? He faded into silence, forever haunted by the woman he could never win back.